I'm wildly aware how annoying this ticking noise is. Apologies. It's midnight. Thank you all for tuning in. The music that you are currently listening to is an excerpt from When Do the Bells Stop When We Are Out of Time by Dan Nolan. I'm Fraz Ireland, and I will be guiding you through the next 60 or so minutes, sharing sounds, thoughts, and perhaps some questions. You may like to imagine this as a bedtime podcast, or you may not be ready for bed just yet, and that's okay too. During the next hour, we'll be hearing from some of the composers who have written music for the concert. We'll listen to excerpts from their music, as well as other complementary tracks to give you, the audience, a more complete picture of these composers, not just as sound makers, but as people. Please don't listen while driving or if you're operating heavy machinery. In the past few months, it's mostly been my voice that you've been listening to inside your heads. I am the chip inside the COVID vaccine, the pea under your mattress, the fly in your soup, and I'm really glad you made it to this pre-concert talk. I often find that pre-concert talks are more interesting than the concerts themselves. If time is a wall, then music is the painting on it, but the pre-concert talk is the opening of the window, the peeling back of the wallpaper, the taste of brick dust. More on this later. I'm going to be bringing you with me on a journey as I travel through an unspecified concert hall. I've just entered the foyer. The polished concrete floor glimmers threateningly as I make my way past groups of people, fancily dressed, clutching their tickets like ants with leaves. It's a strange venue. I've been here a couple of times. You might find it easiest to imagine that we're in a venue familiar to you. Perhaps there's a carpet. Red? No, blue. Well, maybe a bit red. It depends how fast you're going. There's not going to be any fancy visuals for this event. I personally feel that I've seen enough fancy visuals in the past few months. So you may want to close your eyes and imagine along with me. Allow your mind to wander as I wander around this venue. In the concert that's happening later, at 1 o'clock, part of the conceit is that it takes you on a journey through an unfamiliar landscape, on a walk through parks, a beach, a tunnel. So I think it's quite fitting that in this pre-concert event, I'm taking you on a similar journey. But this one's a bit more realistic. So I'm walking up the stairs now and looking out of a window halfway up, and in doing so I see a friendly face. It's none other than a cat. Often I see worms in the corners, just at the edges of the screen, but cats are more likely to walk across the whole screen. They assert themselves a bit more confidently than worms. The next track is a bit of a remix, but it really reminds me of the idea of cats and makes me feel a bit like a little cat slithering around in the gutters looking for a frog or a mouse to have dinner, and maybe licking a bit of a plant or chewing on a discarded Pepsi can. This track was submitted to me by an old friend, Felix, who used to work late night shifts cleaning a casino. And whilst in this job, he befriended a cat who he named Lucky, which used to keep him company in the quiet hours of the early morning. They'd share a can of tuna while watching the sunrise over the mountains. This track is by Felix Brennan, and it is called Three of a Kind (Cats). Thanks for that, Felix. As I continue up the stairs, I notice the people around me, and I recognise some of them as composers, some as performers. A few seem to be leaving. I think perhaps they were here for a different event earlier on. There was a string orchestra playing. Let's hear what Julian has to say about all of this.
Oh, hey, Fraz. Great to see you, or whatever it is that we're doing here online. It's really exciting that your latest 6-monthly observation of this strange schism of time is happening, because I really feel it, just as that siren going past in the background is feeling it. I live in New York City, so twice a year I have to go through that time ellipsis. But most of my friends and family are back in Australia, so that happens twice a year as well, but at different times to here in New York. And a lot of my work is in England and across Europe. So that's another 2 times at least that I have to think about this. So my whole life seems to be just a colliding, not quite meeting up, overlapping tectonic plates of time going in and out of focus. This new piece actually is all about time and its elasticity. Thankfully, here in New York, lockdown is but a distant memory, but I know you've been doing it very tough in England. And this piece was conceived during our own lockdown in the earlier part of 2020. It occurred to me that when you're at home, the only way to really think about time is twice a day, at dawn and at dusk. That's generally the only real markers of how time is unfolding. And because our lives have all compressed and all of our roles have overlapped during things like lockdown, you seem to need 2 ways of measuring time. One is that you need more markers. You need to understand how time is unfolding a little more clearly, but you also need to prize open time at the same time. Because if you're a student and a friend, maybe a lover, a parent, a worker, all of these things, they all overlap and coincide when you're at home under lockdown. And so you kind of need little moments where time doesn't close down but actually opens up, maybe just a minute or 2, where you can actually see time as being much more infinite. So this composition, which is actually part of a 24-hour composition called Elastic Ambience, is all about that. It's about marking time, but in an ambient sense. So every hour across the course of a day, the soundscape changes in some way. But it's also about opening things up, and that's why every hour is a study into the elasticity of how time can move sideways, up and down, back and forth, etc. And this is just a little glimpse into this overall project.
We're in a strange space at the moment, this valley between two concerts, a liminal space of sorts. Everyone is waiting or on their way somewhere, and no one can see for all the fog, like zoomed out sand scattering itself across the picture and wiggling around between our ears like disgruntled pasta. One thing that's really important, I think, is to stay aware and stay focused. And particularly when you're counting down the last hour before a concert, as we are, there's 45 minutes left, you have to keep track of time or you might just miss it. This next short piece will hopefully help to keep you on track.
Time. Focus. Focus. Focus about time. Focus. 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 It's about time. Focus. Focus. Focus.
Okay, I'd better head on a little bit into the recital room, and from here I think I'm going to talk a bit about the point of this concert and, in my opinion, the importance of pre-concert talks. This is a very short taster of perhaps a more substantial pre-concert talk sometime in the future, a kind of pre-concert pre-talk. We'll see. I've been thinking a lot about the edges recently, and something we've missed out on during this last year is talking to other people at either side of and sometimes during a concert or any kind of event, hearing passers-by lament at a horrible new composition or celebrating the beautiful sound of 15 slowly rotating oboes. These things are really important to the way we experience the event as a whole, and we all know this obviously, but I've also seen little nuggets of conversation online recently about program notes and titles and all the things that perhaps composers like to distance themselves from. There's several overlapping definitions of paratext. Some of them, I think, are wrong, but it is worth acknowledging them. Para, meaning alongside. Paratext, therefore, means alongside the text. The term was used originally by Gerard Genette in 1997 regarding literary texts to describe anything that is presented alongside but not specifically within the text, the titles and the paper, even the forward, the back cover, even the appearance of the art on the cover. Some of this is created by the author and some is contributed by other people. Paratext exists in a liminal space at the edge of what we think of as the piece and acts as the threshold across which we must traverse in order to access the text. Other people have started discussing paratext as anything outside a text that contributes to the world of it. An author tweeting something about a character, but I don't like this definition of paratext. I think it's wrong, so I'm going to ignore it. But I think the point that I'm making here, and the reason I'm interrupting my own concert to plug my opinion, is I think we need to start thinking more actively about how paratext operates in relation to performance. This is really the only point that I'm making at this point. I'll probably go on to make more later in my life. But in a concert, there are so many things that exist alongside the actual music that we know are important. Liveness, I think, exists in the paratext. This event tonight that's happening specifically between 12 and 1 in preparation for a concert that will happen from 1 o'clock till 2 o'clock in the morning. The time is very important. The whole thing is about time, and we're manufacturing liveness by existing in the same time and you interacting in the chat if you are doing. That is the liveness. Anyway, I just think it's important to lean into the idea that perhaps the composers and authors can contribute to the way that we listen by actively participating in the creation of their paratext. It doesn't matter if you agree or disagree, but this this event, this pre-concert, hour-long pre-concert talk, this is about what the composers, who they are, what they want, or what they don't want. Anyway, I'm so tired. Out of character, I'm genuinely very tired. That line was scripted. It's the only thing so far that has been. Anyway, this mini lecture was unsanctioned, so I better leave the room and go find somewhere else to be. I think that I'll head towards the bar. There's a shortcut to the bar through the radio room. Let's see what's happening in there. It's a bit weird in here. You just leave all the radio stations running at once and hope for the best. I've just noticed that there's a composer in the corner. It's Sebastian. He's gesturing that he can't speak just at the moment because he's on the phone. Something about insurance, I think. But he's just passed me a message to read out about his piece that we'll be hearing later on in the real concert. It's called Static Interference and aims to emulate the horrible sound of an old radio breaking up and distorting. The sounds are all sourced from an old radio broadcast archives. And I guess that explains why he's here in the radio room. Let's just listen to a sample of his piece in preparation for hearing it in full later.
again. Do you have to have drainage in the bottom of those pots? Is that, if you don't, is that going to cause problems?
Okay. I think it's time to leave the radio room. Let's go. Well, the crowd is certainly getting bigger. Or perhaps I'm just getting smaller. I'll find somewhere away from them all so that you can hear me a little bit better. Next, you're going to hear my remix of a track made for the concert by Roussel, my collaborator. The track that Elle made takes recordings of my voice from a combination of scripts and conversations, and she's combined them together. I've basically done the same thing again with her piece, just repeating the process. This track is called Filibuster 2. I feel like I spend too much time writing biographies.
The audience trusted
Perhaps
me.
it's better to just make them up on the spot. Speak them.
And I wonder if you trust me the
Nobody
same
reads them anyway.
now.
There's people and places they can
Because
rest,
you know that
particularly not when they're
obviously
just-
I'm going to go on
I
and say
think
something
any
that
time, but
requires you know
listen
it's
to
not
them
about
now.
what you say, it's
It's
about
about
filibuster,
what
you imply you will
for.
for. It's about establishing
never really heard of happening before.
an
so maybe it was
expectation
just
of the future.
luck.
If you lose their
Well,
trust,
you know,
then you might as well say
it's
not
like
realise. Because they won't
each page
even
is
engage,
a
they won't
thing.
listen,
Just
they
like
won't
walking
listen
through
to
pressure, or
the
they
grass,
just
trees
randomly
and
sit down and
10 minutes
started
talking
drawing
about
read a
how
book.
his clothes were uncomfortable
I didn't
into
because
doing
it stopped,
too
but
fast.
I
And the
threw
fact
away
that for
the
so
book
long
and
it
made
didn't
it
comfort
boy
him
sat
and
at
was
home.
that you lot helped him or whatever different ways he dealt with it and just jumped straight to a point.
And I
It
thought,
worked a little
this
bit
is fantastic.
when the villagers trusted him, but
And
I
the
wonder
human
maybe
think
he'd
of
do
all
it
the
again
things
better.
that
I
we
wonder
do.
if he'd listen to maybe
better
he'd
way
work
or
on doing
somewhere
that
else.
that didn't end with
Esteemed audience, I won't insult your intelligence by pointing out that time is not free. Time is never free. And it is therefore now time for the ad break. Listen carefully, but do not purchase anything. This is the sound of me opening a can of cold strong and dipping my fingers in and licking the sweet nectar as it drips off. Advertising. Good evening. This evening's concert will begin in 30 minutes. So there's not that much time left before the concert anymore. I'm most of the way, my seat is at the top of the concert hall, so I'm halfway up. And I'm going to just carry on wandering around and see if I bump into anyone. It seems that just ahead is someone that I know. It's Henry. I'm going to ask him to introduce a little of his piece that we're going to hear more of later on.
Hi everyone, I'm Henry George Page, and this is an excerpt from a rather fun Nordic genre project by a film student friend of mine. And this is a short Hi everyone, I'm Henry George Page. Jazzy, noirish style chase track called Sue's Pursuit. Sue's Pursuit. Sue's Pursuit. Jazzy. Sue's Pursuit. I'm Henry George Page. Jazzy. Hi everyone. Sue's Pursuit. Genre project by a
Thanks. It's worth mentioning at this point that there are links to find out a bit more about some of the composers involved. Follow them on social media, find their websites. Those links can be found in the video description. So please do that. They're all really cool. So the next piece doesn't really need any introduction. I think it speaks for itself. Let's go. Wait a minute, I totally forgot the entire point of this piece. I mean, let me just backtrack for one moment. So, as I've continued walking along, I find my way into a kitchen, and I see on the side of, you know how kitchens have sides, I see at the side a microwave, and I'm being beckoned by a can of baked beans, and it puts its little fingers out of the top of the can and just points into the microwave. And so I shrink down to the size of a bean, climb into the microwave with the bowl full of baked beans, and this is what I hear. Come on. I think there's maybe a bit of a technical hitch. It's completely my fault.
Hi everyone.
I got it. Here we go. Okay, so I'm just climbing out of the microwave. That was warm. And on my way out of the kitchen, I return to the corridor. And as I continue along the corridor, I find another composer who has written a piece for the concert that's going to happen later on. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi, I'm Samuel Hollywood Summers. My piece, Bright Ideas, is an interactive piece of generative music or an interactive music experience. And the idea is to launch your brain at a bunch of different ideas and expose yourself to as many ideas as possible. Visually, these are represented by light bulbs, which turn on and off as you interact with the environment. And they also start and stop producing hums as you turn them on and off, and produce musical tones as well. It's an open-ended piece. You can play it for as long or as short as you like, and it's just inviting people to expose themselves to ideas and also to make some noise, make some music in a less than traditional manner. Thanks.
Here's just a very brief sample of the piece that Samuel was talking about. And you can find a link to this in the video description as well. Once again, a reminder that you can find more information about that in the video description. So I mentioned earlier my collaborator, Angela Roussel, and I just want to reintroduce her with this fictionalized opening paragraph that describes how we met. I first met Angela at a party. An acquaintance of mine had heard me sharing an anecdote and told me afterwards that I sounded just like her friend who, as luck would have it, was also at the party. I swept up my glass and followed her into the basement where Angela was lurking. She was poised, whether by chance or design I do not know, tantalizingly near to the centre of a pool of light which seemed to be refracting through a fish tank and rippled across her bespectacled face. She faced into the small, low-ceilinged room, and tilt of her head and the angle it caused her head fall in seemed to dare someone else to join her in the light. But the other people in the room were too engrossed in their conversations or mindless movement to the music to notice her challenge. I noticed all of this as we descended the steep staircase, and it was only a couple of paces across the floor to reach the edge of the light. Once we had been introduced, I discovered that she was an artist, a filmmaker, in fact, and she did have a similar voice to mine. "This," said my friend, "is Angela Roussel, your voice double. Please, call me Elle. My friends do." I nodded. I didn't feel that I knew her well enough to ask if the L was short for Angela or Roussel. Either way, it is a curious name, Elle Roussel. And you can follow her on Twitter. The link is in the video description. That text was written by our mutual friend who wishes to remain anonymous for the purpose of this, because she's embarrassed. This evening's concert will begin in 15 minutes. So, 15 minutes. I really have to go and try and find my seat now. And you probably all should do similarly. I, for one, am looking forward to the concert that's happening at 1 o'clock and ending at 2. I just mentioned Elle Roussel, and we're now going to hear a little from her, but first Julian will speak.
It feels crazy to acknowledge it now, but this piece was the last piece of mine to be performed before Lockdown 1 in New York last March. It's a large-scale work. It involves between 30 and 40 people. All are invited, and so I've deliberately made the aperture of participation very wide and very low. If you can make a sound with your voice and are confident enough to contribute to a group making sounds with their voices, then you can be part of this. And as such, the 30 or so singers you're hearing are right across the spectrum of talent, or of experience, I should say, from the classically trained and the folk singer through to the absolute beginner who's never sung before in public. They are joined by a discrete chorus of hidden brass players. They are the ones almost solely in this piece who have some basic experience with instruments. And there's also a part for pipe organ, which is actually keeping time. They are marking the time minute by minute, and it's effectively an instruction score, so anyone who's not an organist could still do this as well. They have a bag of bolts, and they have a particular pattern that they follow. But the pipe organ has been prepared, pre-tuned in a sense, so the stops are at very specific spaces to get the desired effect. And there's also a discrete second organ tucked away at the side of the stage. So this is effectively a study into group dynamics and how the feedback loops and influences of the crowd can then be shifted depending on what fixed pitch instruments are happening and what the clock is registering at any one moment. It's called a civic space.
and we'll hear the whole of Julian's piece in the main concert, but for now you're going to hear Elle's remix of their piece. She says, Angela, that is, says of her version of the piece, "It should feel like the sonic equivalent of scanning your eyes across a news article. Perhaps you read the first sentence, maybe a few of the other words. Your eyes dart around a bit, honing in on a couple of key points, and you make a mental note to read it properly sometime in the future." Here it is. This evening's concert will begin in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. I'm walking up to the door that I need to go through now to find my seat, and I think you probably all should do as well. Though there might be still time to grab a Coke or other unspecified drink, perhaps hot chocolate at this hour. As I'm on my way, I happen across another composer who, again, we will hear more from later in the concert. In fact, she's probably in a rush to get backstage to present her piece in the concert. Anyway, let's hear this, another taster for what's coming up next.
I'm Emily Pedersen, and this is a remix of my piece Lullaby for Lost Time, played by Flori Maunders. I read somewhere that when kids are about 13, they have a kind of something in the brain makes it like a kind of mini second childhood, and it can be a chance to fill in some gaps from earlier on. So this piece is a lullaby for somebody who's missed out on parts of their early childhood. It takes on the voice of the person singing the lullaby, I guess a family member, but not necessarily a biological one or even a parent. It laments the teenagers' lost childhood sections, owns the frustration of supporting them, and wonders and hopes for a better, more secure future.
And just a reminder that we'll hear the unremixed version of that piece from 1 o'clock in the concert that will happen at 1 till 2 a.m. this morning. So there's not that much time left until the concert begins. There might just be enough time for me to, as I'm getting into my seat, there might just be enough time for me to tell you a little excerpt from a conversation that I had on a bus with a stranger. This evening's concert will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats. So, apologies for that interruption. I obviously have no control over any of the announcements from the front of house staff. My little story. The stranger said to me, "Shoot for the moon, for if you miss, you'll land among the stars. The vast emptiness of space is swarming, swimming with the eels of long-forgotten love song. In space, no one can hear you dream. Scream into the darkness, but it won't scream back. All you'll hear is the sound of the trees falling behind you that you long ago forgot to water. They reached out for you, but you had turned away, and they starved, slowly. Screaming, but no one could hear them, except for the ghosts." And I think there might just be time for a couple more brief excerpts from pieces that will be heard in their entirety later on. That was from Charlotte Marlow, and it was the first few letters from the RNA transcripts of COVID-19 sonified and manipulated. Have you found your seats yet? I'm nearly at mine. I accidentally sat in the wrong seat at first, and then someone came up to me and said, "Excuse me, I think that's my seat." And this concert is sold out, so I admit I was completely in the wrong, so I stood up and picked up my bag and my telescope and had to walk all the way around to my actual seat. You see, I had confused the letter E for the letter Y because they look quite similar. So anyway, I'm just coming up to my seat. I hope that you are as well. This evening's concert will begin in 3 minutes. Please take your seats. Okay, it really is getting close to the hour. And I am now actually in my correct seat. Let's just hear one more excerpt. This is from a piece by Joanna Ward. we'll hear that in its entirety later. I just need to mention something that just happened to me. Someone just came up to me and handed me one of those American party cups full of worms. It was very strange, and I'm not entirely sure what to do with it. Like, where do you put worms in a concert? And all of the other seats are full, so I can't just put it on the seat next to me. I'm not really sure. Felix concert is about to begin. There is no longer time to grab a Coke. And I guess there's also no time to discard my worms. Anyway, I'll be quiet now. Perhaps it's time to close your eyes ready for the concert. Thanks everyone for coming to the pre-concert talk and then the concert. Good night.